Okay, so we all want to be happy, right? But what does like actually living a good life, what does that even mean?
It's such a big question.
Huge, right? Like it's one of the biggest. And you sent me some fascinating sources about the philosophy of happiness.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to unpack all that good stuff together and hopefully see what clicks for you, like what resonates
Hmm.
with you listening.
For sure.
We're going from ancient wisdom all the way to like modern psychology. So
This is going to be a journey.
get ready, buckle up, get ready for some aha moments.
Yeah.
For example, did you know that there's like a difference between uh, a happy life and a meaningful life?
Oh, yeah.
We'll get to that a
Later.
little bit later, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's super interesting stuff.
Yeah. It's fascinating how, it, like, humans have been grappling with this question of happiness for centuries.
Forever.
And luckily for us, though, all these philosophers through time have given us this whole toolbox
I love that.
of, like, perspectives to explore.
Yeah. And frameworks.
Yeah.
So let's start our journey
Okay.
with Aristotle
Let's do it.
and his idea of eudaimonia. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I first saw that word, I thought it was some kind of like fancy pasta dish.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I could see that.
Wait, what is this?
The resemblance is definitely there.
But
It's a little more profound,
a little bit, just a tad.
right, than that, yeah.
Yeah.
Eudaimonia isn't about, like, fleeting moments of pleasure or anything like that. It's about flourishing, basically, as a human. You're flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
You're living with purpose,
Yeah.
fulfilling your potential.
Mm.
It's not just about, like, your career or whatever. It's about, like, all areas of life, relationships, community, personal growth.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about like being good and doing good as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder, like, what did Aristotle consider good?
Well, he believed that everybody, every human, has this unique set of potentials.
Mm.
And true happiness comes from developing those potentials to their fullest.
Mm.
But it's not just about individual achievement either.
Okay.
He emphasized virtue a lot. Like honesty, courage, compassion, wisdom. All that is essential parts of a flourishing life.
So aligning your actions with your values.
Yeah.
Striving to be your best self.
Yeah.
And contributing to the well-being of others. I mean,
Yeah.
this is really...
It's deep stuff.
It is, and it can get a little heavy, but just stick with us. So think about a time when you felt truly like alive, like you were on the right path, you were doing what mattered most to you. Was it a challenging project? Was it something creative? Was it a really deep conversation with a friend? Those moments of alignment where your actions are matching your values,
Yeah.
that's eudaimonia in action.
Absolutely. And, what's interesting is, like, this ancient idea, eudaimonia, it's super relevant to modern psychology.
That's cool.
Think of all the things like self-actualization, personal growth, finding your purpose. It's all that same kind of drive to, like, become the best version of yourself.
So Aristotle was like the OG self-help guru. Okay. Let's switch gears a bit.
Okay.
And explore a philosophy that honestly often gets a bit of a bad rap. Hedonism.
Oh, yeah.
People hear pleasure seeking and they think it's just all about overindulgence and, instant gratification. But maybe there's a smarter side to this.
Totally. So, like, the core idea is to maximize pleasure, minimize pain.
Okay.
Which, on the surface doesn't sound that bad. But the problem is, like, in our modern world especially, we're just constantly bombarded with these messages that, like, happiness equals buying more stuff, having more experiences, getting that next dopamine hit.
It's very consumerist.
Yeah, and it leads to, like, the hedonic treadmill. You're always striving for the next thing, never quite finding that lasting satisfaction.
It's like we're just constantly chasing that next high, but it never delivers the goods.
Right.
So how do we, like, escape that trap? Is it just about, like, denying ourselves any pleasure?
No, not really.
Okay.
So you have the ancient philosopher Epicurus.
Okay.
Now, he was actually a proponent of hedonism, but he had a much more nuanced take on it. He believed that true pleasure comes from serenity.
Wow.
And freedom from anxiety.
Yeah.
Not from material excess or, like, fleeting sensation.
So it's not about denying yourself pleasure. It's about choosing the right kind of pleasure.
Exactly.
Like the kind that brings genuine and lasting satisfaction.
Yes.
That's a really cool distinction.
Yeah.
It makes you think, like, does scrolling social media for hours on end, does that really bring you joy?
Yeah.
Or are there like simpler, more mindful activities like spending time in nature or
Yeah.
connecting with loved ones
Hold
or
on.
doing something creative like a hobby
Yeah.
that nourish you
Yeah.
and bring that sense of contentment?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
Hmm.
Are you chasing those fleeting highs? Or are you cultivating that kind of inner peace that fuels genuine happiness?
I like that.
And, you know, Epicurus wasn't saying to, like, isolate yourself or deprive yourself. He believed in enjoying the simple pleasures of life,
Right.
good food,
Yep.
good company, intellectual pursuits, all that stuff. But he emphasized doing so in moderation
Yeah.
and being aware of, like, the pitfalls of excessive indulgence.
Makes sense.
So, like, finding that balance.
So finding that balance between enjoying those pleasures, but cultivating inner peace, which, it makes me think of Stoicism.
Oh, for sure.
Is there a connection there?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Stoicism emphasizes finding happiness by accepting what you can't control and focusing on your inner self.
Give us Stoicism 101.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
what does it mean to, like, accept what you can't control?
Okay, so imagine this. You're stuck in traffic. You're late for a super important meeting.
Oh.
You can either get stressed out, honk the horn, fume about how unfair it all is.
Yeah.
Or you can accept that, like, the traffic is beyond your control.
Right.
And use the time to listen to a podcast. Nice.
Practice mindfulness.
Yes.
Maybe just enjoy a few moments of peace.
Right.
The Stoics believed that true happiness, it comes from mastering your own mind, not trying to control external events.
Easier said than done, though.
It is.
Right. Especially in our, like, fast-paced, constantly connected world.
Yeah.
It feels like we're bombarded with things that are outside of our control
Or sure.
all the time.
Yeah.
So how did the Stoics deal with that?
Well, they developed a bunch of practices and principles to help cultivate inner peace and resilience.
Okay, like what?
So one of them is called negative visualization.
Negative visualization.
Yeah. And it involves, like, imagining the worst case scenario in any given situation.
Wait, hold on. You're saying intentionally think about bad things happening?
Right.
How does that help?
It sounds kind of counterintuitive,
It does.
but by mentally preparing for the possibility of these negative events, you reduce your anxiety about them.
How interesting. So you realize you can handle whatever life throws your way. And then you start to appreciate the good things even more.
It's about acknowledging that impermanence, right?
Yes.
Of everything, material possessions,
Yeah.
relationships, like all of it.
Yeah.
And finding that peace
In the present moment.
in the present moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's about reframing situations, shifting your perspective,
Exactly.
focusing on what you can control.
Yes.
Your thoughts, actions, reactions. This is like, I can see how this would be so powerful,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with stress or uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
This almost sounds like a precursor to, like, modern mindfulness techniques.
You're right. There's a huge connection between Stoicism and modern mindfulness.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Both emphasizing being present, accepting what is, focusing on that inner state rather than what's happening around you.
Wow. Ancient wisdom.
It's amazing.
Meeting modern psychology. Okay, I'm ready for more of these tools. Where do we go from here?
All right. Welcome back. Ready for more on happiness.
Yeah, I'm hooked. It's amazing how these, like, ancient ideas are still so relevant, you know? Like, speaking of timeless wisdom, I keep thinking about Aristotle's eudaimonia
Oh, yeah.
and those moments of flourishing you talked about. Is there anything else in the sources that, like, digs deeper into what that actually looks like?
Well, one thing that stood out to me was Aristotle's emphasis on virtue.
Okay.
He believed that, like, true happiness wasn't just about chasing pleasure or success for its own sake.
Right.
It was about developing and practicing virtues.
So character building.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Qualities like honesty, courage, compassion, temperance, wisdom.
Okay, so it can't just be about, like, being a good person in a vacuum, right? Like, how did Aristotle see virtue playing out in everyday life?
Yeah, for him, virtue wasn't just like these abstract principles.
Right.
It was about, like, living those principles in every action, every choice you make, every interaction.
So, like, what?
Like being a good friend, a supportive partner, a responsible citizen, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
It's about showing up with integrity and making choices that really reflect your values.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about integrating those virtues into your daily life.
Yeah.
But, like, what happens when virtues conflict?
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, what if you have to choose between being honest and being kind? How do you navigate those tricky situations?
That is a great question. Well, Aristotle, he believed that practical wisdom was key to navigating those ethical dilemmas.
Practical wisdom.
Yeah, or phronesis. Yeah,
Phronesis.
it's a fun word.
I like
It's
that.
basically about using your judgment to figure out the best course of action
Right.
in a specific situation. So
There's no easy answer.
not really, no.
Right.
But it involves carefully considering, uh, the context, the potential consequences, and what values are at stake.
So it's not just about like blindly following rules. It's about using your wisdom
Right.
and your experience
Yeah.
to make the best choices possible. That reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, the whole idea of pleasure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We talked about hedonism and like the potential pitfalls of chasing those fleeting pleasures.
Right.
But I'm curious, is there a place for pleasure in a virtuous life?
Absolutely.
Right.
Aristotle believed pleasure was a natural and important part of the human experience.
Okay.
However, he cautioned against making pleasure the ultimate goal of life.
Okay.
Instead, he saw pleasure as like a byproduct
I
of
would say.
living virtuously.
So it's like the cherry on top, not the whole sundae.
Yes, exactly.
You experience pleasure as a result of living in alignment with your values and striving for excellence.
Yeah, think of it this way.
Yeah.
Imagine you're a musician and you've been practicing diligently for this big performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of accomplishment and joy you get after you nail it,
Oh, yeah.
that's a kind of pleasure, right?
For sure.
But that pleasure is deeply connected to the effort, the discipline, all that,
Right.
the pursuit of excellence that led up to it.
It's like a deeper,
Yes.
more meaningful kind of pleasure that
Right.
comes from living that life of purpose and integrity. It's not just about like fleeting sensations. It's
Mhm.
about the satisfaction
Yeah.
of really like aligning your actions with your values.
Exactly. And I think this is where Stoicism and hedonism
Okay.
can actually complement each other.
Interesting.
So while the Stoics emphasize accepting what you can't control, including like the absence of pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
they also recognize the importance of appreciating the simple pleasures that life has to offer.
So it's about finding that balance between enjoying life's pleasures,
Yeah.
but also cultivating a sense of detachment from them.
Right. Exactly.
It reminds me of that quote, "Don't set your heart on so many things."
Oh, yeah.
Is that Stoic wisdom?
It definitely aligns with Stoic principles.
Okay.
The Stoics believed that by not getting too attached to external things, including pleasure,
Right.
you could achieve a greater sense of inner peace and freedom. Yeah, it doesn't mean living a life devoid of joy or anything,
Right.
but it's more about approaching those pleasures with mindfulness and non-attachment.
It sounds like a recipe for resilience.
It is.
You can savor the good times without being like devastated when they inevitably pass.
Exactly.
Okay. Now I want to shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about utilitarianism.
Oh, yeah.
We touched on it earlier,
Uh-huh.
but I'd love to dive a little deeper into this idea of maximizing happiness for the greatest number of people.
It's a big one.
It's a noble goal, but I imagine it gets complicated when you try to put it into practice.
Oh, for sure. You're absolutely right. Utilitarianism raises all sorts of questions about how we define happiness, how we even measure it, how we balance individual rights with the well-being of the collective.
Yeah. It's like you're trying to solve this giant ethical equation.
Yeah.
What happens when the happiness of the majority like clashes with the rights of the minority?
Yeah.
How do we navigate that?
That's where the debate gets really interesting. And there are actually like different schools of thought
Oh, wow.
with utilitarianism
Okay.
on how to address these complexities. For instance, some argue for a more nuanced approach that considers not just like the quantity of happiness,
Yeah.
but also its quality, distribution, and the long-term consequences.
So it's not just about like maximizing happiness at all costs.
Right.
It's about taking like a more holistic
Yeah.
view, considering all those potential ramifications.
Exactly.
Mm.
And it's also about recognizing that there are limits
Okay.
to how much we can actually predict and control the consequences of our actions.
Right.
But even with all that, the core principle of utilitarianism, striving to create a world with more happiness and less suffering, remains a powerful ideal.
Yeah, it is. It's a call to action.
It is.
To think beyond our own self-interest and consider the impact of our choices.
Yeah.
I can see how this connects with the idea of virtue that we discussed with Aristotle.
Totally.
Especially those virtues of compassion and justice.
Yeah. And it also raises that question of how we even define happiness
Right.
in a way that encompasses all the different experiences and perspectives, of different people.
It's very complex.
Yeah, is happiness about, like, material wealth,
Yeah.
social status,
Yeah.
personal fulfillment, something else entirely?
Right. All those different angles.
Yeah.
So utilitarianism really forces us to confront those big questions,
As,
about the nature of happiness,
hmm,
morality,
yeah,
the good life.
right.
And even if there are no, easy answers,
Right.
I think it's a valuable framework for thinking about how to create a better world.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, now let's revisit existentialism for a moment.
Okay.
We talked about how it emphasizes the individual's responsibility to create meaning in a world without inherent purpose.
Right.
But honestly, that can feel pretty daunting. Like, where do you even begin to create meaning
Yeah.
when it feels like everything is subjective?
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I think it starts by acknowledging the freedom we have
Okay.
to choose our own values,
Okay.
our own beliefs, and our own path.
It's like we're handed this blank canvas and we get to decide what to paint on it.
Exactly.
But with so many possibilities, it can feel paralyzing.
Yeah, it can.
How do you avoid feeling lost,
Right.
overwhelmed by all that freedom?
Well, the existentialists would say that feeling of anxiety and uncertainty, that's just a part of the human condition.
Okay.
It's precisely because we have that freedom to choose that we feel the weight of responsibility for our choices.
So it's not about eliminating the anxiety. It's
Yeah.
about embracing it as part of the process.
Yeah,
Of creating meaning.
exactly. They wouldn't give you a step-by-step guide to finding your purpose.
Okay.
Instead, they'd encourage you to, face the absurdity of existence head on.
Wow.
Acknowledge that lack of inherent meaning. Embrace the freedom and responsibility that comes with it.
It's about finding that courage to create your own meaning, even when things are uncertain, even when it feels absurd.
Exactly.
And maybe that meaning comes from, the act of choosing itself.
It really could. And I think that's a powerful message for anyone feeling lost.
Yeah.
It's not about finding some, grand universal purpose.
Right.
It's about finding what resonates with you,
Yeah.
what makes you feel alive,
Uh-huh.
what gives you a sense of direction.
So it's about asking yourself those big questions, like, what do I believe in? What do I care about? What kind of impact do I want to have? And then taking action, even if those actions feel small.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that you are the author
Ooh, I like that.
of your own story.
Yeah.
And you have the power to shape your life, even if you can't control everything that happens to you.
Okay, I'm feeling a little bit more empowered by this existentialist perspective, but I have to admit, I still find myself drawn to that more concrete,
Oh, yeah.
science-backed approach of positive psychology.
Yeah.
Can we circle back to that for a bit?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to be gained from integrating those insights with everything else we've been talking about.
Right, because it's all connected, right?
It is.
Remember PERMA, positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning accomplishment. It feels like we've been touching on all of those elements throughout our whole conversation today.
Totally. And I think that just highlights the fact that all these approaches to happiness, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
They complement and enrich each other.
So let's break down PERMA a little further
Okay.
and see how it connects with all the philosophies we've been talking about.
Let's do it.
Where should we start? Welcome back to our final part of our deep dive into happiness. This has been quite the journey.
It has been a journey.
Exploring all these perspectives.
So many different angles.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm really taking away from this is that, despite all their differences,
Yeah.
all these philosophies seem to agree on one thing, the importance of living intentionally.
Absolutely. It's not about just stumbling upon happiness,
Right. It's not an
You
accident.
got to make conscious choices that align with what you believe in and what's important to you.
And that will lead you toward a more fulfilling life.
Exactly. And it's also recognizing that, happiness isn't this fixed destination,
Right.
Yeah. It's an ongoing journey.
It's a process.
There are going to be ups, there are going to be downs, challenges, setbacks. But by building that resilience, being self-aware, and having a sense of purpose, you can get through those rough patches and find meaning, even in the midst of all the difficulty.
So it's like we're building a happiness toolkit,
I like that.
drawing on all this wisdom.
Yeah.
Aristotle, Epicurus, the Stoics, the utilitarians, the existentialists,
We've got it all.
even positive psychology.
It's all in there.
We've got it all.
And just like a toolkit, it's about picking the right tool for the job.
Right.
Some days you need that stoic hammer of resilience.
Aha, love it.
to handle whatever's going on. Other days, you might need the hedonist screwdriver of pleasure,
Ooh, there it is.
just to appreciate the simple joys of life.
You know, I've been thinking a lot about that hedonic treadmill
Oh,
you
yeah?
talked about, like constantly chasing that next thing, never really finding that satisfaction. It makes me think about the difference between a happy life and a meaningful life.
Oh, that's a good one.
Are they the same thing?
Well, that's a question that's been debated forever.
Right.
There's definitely overlap, but they're not always the same. A happy life is associated with feeling good in the moment, experiencing pleasure, avoiding pain, all that. Subjective feelings of joy and contentment.
So it's more about those like peak emotional experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
While a meaningful life is often linked with having purpose,
Okay.
feeling connected to something bigger than yourself, making a difference in the world.
So it's about that deep fulfillment that comes from having purpose.
Yeah. And research shows that while both are important for well-being, they don't always go hand in hand.
Really?
Yeah. You can have a life full of happy moments, but lacking meaning, or a life full of meaning, but also hardship.
That makes sense.
So, imagine someone wins the lottery. They
Right.
spend their days doing whatever they want, indulging in every pleasure.
Living the dream.
Right. Tons of happiness. But if their life doesn't have that purpose, that connection, it might feel empty.
Yeah, I can see that.
On the flip side, think about someone dedicating their life to a cause. They're passionate about, fighting for social justice or some other tough but rewarding work.
Yeah.
Their life might be full of meaning, but it also involves struggle and sacrifice.
So it's not about choosing one or the other. It's
Sure.
about finding a balance
Exactly.
between those two things, happiness and meaning.
And recognizing that, chasing both happiness and meaning, it's a lifelong thing. It's a journey.
Yeah.
There will be times where you feel happier, times when you feel more fulfilled, and times when you feel a little bit of both.
Maybe it's not about like reaching that perfect state of bliss,
Right.
but about embracing the full experience.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the ups, the downs,
The whole spectrum.
the challenges and the triumphs. It's about living a rich life.
I love that. It's about accepting that life is messy.
It is.
It's complex. And even those tough times, they help us grow.
They do.
They help us understand.
This has been so insightful, but I know some listeners might be thinking like, okay, this is great in theory, but how do I actually do this?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
What are some like practical things
Yeah.
people can do to have more happiness and meaning in their lives?
I think it goes back to those core principles we've been talking about. First, self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Take some time. Reflect on your values, strengths, passions.
Okay.
What matters most to you? What makes you happy? What kind of mark do you want to leave in the world?
So getting clear on your own definition of happiness and meaning.
Yeah, because what works for one person might not work for another.
Totally.
Once you know what you're after,
Yeah.
you can start making choices that line up with those values.
I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Okay, so based on all the research and wisdom, here are some practical tips.
Okay.
First, gratitude. Take some time every day to appreciate the good things, big or small.
Yeah.
Could be as simple as enjoying a cup of coffee or a sunset, telling someone you appreciate them.
Yeah.
Gratitude shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have.
It's like a superpower.
It really is.
It can totally change your perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Second, those relationships. Make time for people who matter.
Mm.
Connect with friends, family, build community.
We're social creatures. We need that.
We do. Strong social connections are one of the biggest factors for happiness and well-being. Third, find activities that bring you joy.
Okay.
Things that make you lose track of time.
That flow state.
Yes. Flow. Could be anything from hobbies to sports to a challenging work project, whatever gets you going. Fourth, find ways to give back to something bigger than yourself.
Okay.
Volunteering, donating, just making choices that make the world a little bit better.
Right. Finding that sweet spot
Yes.
where your passions meet the needs of the world.
Exactly. And finally, remember to take care of yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Physical and mental health. Get enough sleep, eat well, move your body, manage stress.
Self-care is so important.
It's essential. Can't pour from an empty cup.
This has been incredible.
It has.
Exploring all these perspectives on happiness from ancient philosophy to modern psych, it's a great reminder that happiness and meaning aren't some far-off destination.
Yeah.
They're choices.
We make them every day.
We make every day.
Absolutely. It's about showing up authentically for ourselves and for the world in a way that feels true to who we are.
Well, listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into happiness. I hope you've enjoyed the exploration and come away with some new insights and inspiration.
Yeah, keep asking those big questions. Keep trying things out. Keep searching for what brings you joy and fulfillment.
Because the search for a good life is a personal one.
It is. There's no right answer, only the path that feels right to you.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.
And remember, the journey is part of the beauty.
Exactly.
Until next time, happiness seekers.
Keep diving deep.